25 for the personal markup, and move that the committee report it favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 2243.
Without objection, the bill be considered as read and open for Reform Act allows qualified, active, and retired law enforcement officers to carry concealed firearm in national parks, school zones, public transportation, some federal facilities, and that are open to the public. President George W. Bush signed LEOSA into law in 2004 to exempt certain active and retired law enforcement officers carrying a LEOSA photographic identification card from local and state prohibitions on carrying of concealed firearms. In order to qualify under the law, active law enforcement officers must meet several requirements. For example, they must be authorized to carry a firearm by their agency. They can't be subject to disciplinary actions by the agency that could result in a loss of their police power. They have to meet certain firearms qualification standards. They can't be under the influence of alcohol or other intoxicating substance, and they must not be prohibited by federal law from receiving a firearm. Retired law enforcement officers must also meet a number of requirements in order to qualify under LEOSA. For example, they must have separated from service in good standing and served as a law enforcement officer for an aggregate of 10 years or more. They're also required to meet certain firearms training standards and must not be prohibited by federal law from receiving a firearm. The LEOSA Reform Act will allow these officers to carry a concealed firearm in the same manner that many licensed citizens carry a firearm in their state. For example, the Reform Act will allow law enforcement officers qualified under LEOSA to carry firearms, concealed firearms, in national parks, federal facilities that are open to the public, on public transportation, and in other areas. The bill also reduces the frequency that qualified retired law enforcement officers are required to obtain certain qualification standards. Many states allow state-licensed concealed carry permit holders to carry a concealed firearm in gun-free school zones and on public transportation in the state in which they are licensed. This bill affords certain law enforcement officers that same privilege. We should support our active and retired law enforcement officers and ensure that they have ability to protect themselves and others, no matter where they are in our great country. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
And thank you very much, Mr. Jordan. In 2004, Congress passed LEOSA, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, a law that allows both off-duty and retired law enforcement officers to carry concealed firearms anywhere in the country, irrespective of state laws. LEOSA preempted states' judgments about what was best for their own communities and their residents, forcing all states to allow off-duty and retired law enforcement personnel to carry concealed firearms under the terms set by Congress. As Congress debated LEOSA, members of this committee on both sides of the aisle, including the Republican chairman, expressed grave concerns about how the bill violated the essential principles of federalism and undermined the right of states to decide concealed carry gun policies for themselves under the 10th Amendment and under the Second Amendment. The Republican chairman of the Judiciary Committee at the time, Congressman Sensenbrenner, strongly opposed LEOSA and voted against it for this very reason. Several police groups also condemned the legislation and lobbied against it, expressing concerns about how it would affect officer safety, how it could create more confusion in responding to active shooters, how it might expose their agencies to more liability when officers carried under LEOSA, and how it failed to spell out the specific qualifications and requirements as they pertained to retired officers. Despite all of these objections, LEOSA became law. Although it did at least include some significant limitations and imposed common sense training requirements, which have now been in place for more than 20 years. The bill we're considering today, the LEOSA Reform Act, would wipe the slate clean in a way that will undoubtedly bring delight to the NRA, ending whatever remaining discretion states have to limit the circumstances and places at which individuals can enjoy concealed carry under LEOSA. It would force states to permit retired and current officers to carry concealed firearms onto private property open to the public, including restaurants, bars, parks, and playgrounds. It would force states to allow off-duty and retired officers to engage in concealed carry on buses, trains, and subways. Shockingly, it would even force states to allow for the concealed carry of firearms in gun-free school zones. It also allows off-duty and retired law enforcement officers to completely disregard state laws prohibiting high-capacity magazines. This legislation not only supersedes the judgment and the policy discretion of the states, but it also threatens the safety and security of federal agencies by forcing them to allow concealed carry under LEOSA in many federal buildings. Forcing federal offices and buildings to allow concealed carry in these places is a completely unnecessary risk today. Another troubling aspect of this legislation is that it weakens training standards. Under current law, a person carrying under LEOSA must meet state training requirements every year. But this legislation would allow individuals to conceal carry with training certification as sparingly as every 3 years. This is troubling given that the bill extends nationwide concealed carry to retired officers who are no longer receiving the training that accompanies their employment. All of these expansions are risky given the large number of people this new law applies to. We know there are more than 700,000 active law enforcement officers nationwide, and while we don't know the exact number of retired officers, we know the number has increased significantly in recent years as many departments across the country have faced sharp increases in retirement rates. One study found that there are 4 retired officers and 4 resigned officers for every 100 active officers each year. So the universe of people this bill would apply to is substantial, certainly weighing in the hundreds of thousands. And when it comes to the relaxed training requirements, we're ultimately talking about a lot of people, including many who are retired and no longer receiving regular training, all with the ability to carry concealed firearms in many more places. Of course, our colleagues wish it were the case that a good guy with a gun is the answer to a bad guy with a gun, but the research simply doesn't bear it out. Studies show that individuals successfully defend themselves with a gun in less than 1% of crimes involving personal contact. Members, gun accidents, and unnecessary escalation remain pervasive threats. We have dozens of proposals that we know would actually make our community safer, Mr. Chairman, while still respecting states' rights. This bill is not one of them. I urge all of our colleagues to oppose this legislation on a bipartisan basis, as many members did the last time it came up in an even better form. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair offers an amendment in the nature of the substitute. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a
Without objection, the
substitute.
amendment in the nature of substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text for purpose of the amendment. The chair is recognized to explain the amendment. This amendment simply removes the year in the title of the bill. Is not intended in any way to alter the important purpose of the legislation. I urge support of the amendment. I yield back. Who seeks recognition? The question occurs then. What is this? Chair asks unanimous consent to enter into the record the Sergeants Benevolent Association statement of support, the National Fraternal Order of Police statement of support, and a number of other law enforcement agencies who support the legislation. Now the question occurs on passage of the adoption of the amendment in nature of a substitute. This will be followed immediately by a vote on reporting the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes definitely had it. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is on favor of reporting the bill as amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
I think the ayes had it again, but I think that'll be recorded.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's not that I don't trust your judgment, but I would like a recorded vote on that. So.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes aye. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes aye. Mr. Klein? Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes yes. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes yes. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Lee? Ms. Lee votes aye. Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes aye. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes aye. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes aye. Mr. Gill? Mr. Baumgardner? Mr. Raskin? No. Mr. Raskin votes no. Mr. Nadler? No. Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes no. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? No. Mr. Johnson votes no. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Mr. Correa? Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes no. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes no. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes no. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes no. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes no. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett?
No.
Ms. Crockett votes no. Mr. Issa, you're not recorded. Mr. Issa votes yes. Mr. Massey, you're not recorded. Mr. Massey votes aye. Ms. Scanlon, you're not recorded. Ms. Scanlon votes no. Mr. Baumgartner votes yes. Mr. Grothman votes yes.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 11 noes.
Without objection, the bill will be reported as a single amendment in nature of a substitute. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. Without objection, the bill will be reported as a single amendment in nature of a substitute, incorporating all adopted amendments, and staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Okay, pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 2240, the Improving Law Enforcement Officer Safety and Wellness Through Data Act of 2025 for purpose of markup. Move that the committee report it favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 2240.
Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair is now recognized for an opening statement. The Improving Law Enforcement Officer Safety and Wellness Through Data Act will help our men and women in blue. Police officers risk their lives every day to protect our communities. Unfortunately, they face the continued threat of unprovoked attacks. The defund the police movement continues to have ripple effects throughout the country as criminals remain brazen in their attacks against police officers. In New York City last year, a violent gang of migrants viciously attacked 2 NYPD officers, one of whom was back out on the street after a slap on the wrist jail sentence. Rogue prosecutors and left-wing bail reform policies continue to allow criminals back on the street with no accountability. We should be clear, the threat to officer safety is very real. In 2024, 342 officers were shot in the line of duty, including 61 in ambush-style attacks. 2023 saw the highest number of officers shot in the line of duty recorded in a year, with 378. While the government collects basic information on these attacks, such as when the attack occurred and what types of weapons were used, more information is needed to help law enforcement officers prepare for, identify, and prevent future anti-police activity. Again, this bill will help provide the tools for police officers to train for and prevent attacks that is so important in the environment our police officers live and work in today. Legislation will also shed light on the mental health impacts of aggressive activity or other trauma on law enforcement, and it will help ascertain the availability and extent to which mental health resources for officers are used. Mental health resources are another crucial tool in the toolbox as law enforcement officers continue to risk their lives every day to keep their communities safe. We must take care of those who do so much to take care of us. This legislation is common sense, seeks to gather more information on an issue to then bring forward the best possible solutions for our law enforcement officers. We should work together to take a stand against attacks on law enforcement and support the men and women who risk their lives every day. That I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I support the Improving Law Enforcement Officer Safety and Wellness Through Data Act. It purports to improve law enforcement officer safety and wellness by requiring that the Attorney General and other federal officials issue reports on attacks on officers, aggression against officers, and officer mental health. The collection and reporting of information in general, and this information is unobjectionable. But I do feel compelled to point out the obvious here. The legislation does nothing to actually make police officers safer. In fact, none of the bills we're marking up today would make law enforcement or anybody else in the country safer. And one of them, the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, so-called, which is strongly opposed by law enforcement, would make everybody much less safe, including police officers. The reality is, although I'm going to support the legislation, we don't need another report to tell us what is the biggest threat to officer safety in America. We already know what it is. It's guns that are by far the most serious threat to police officer safety in America. We have a lot more firearms than we do people in the United States. We have a rate of gun homicide 20 times higher than the nations of the European Union, 7 times higher than the people of Canada. No wonder they don't want to take up Donald Trump's offer to become part of the United States. They're a lot safer with the gun laws in Canada than they would be under Donald Trump's gun laws. We have a rate of gun death 340 times higher than the people of the United Kingdom. Gun violence is now the #1 cause of death for young people under 18 in the United States of America. Law enforcement officers in the U.S. are far more likely to be fatally shot than police officers in any other developed nation on earth. From 2012 to 2021, 456 police officers were shot and killed in our country. During that same 10-year period, 12 officers were shot and fatally shot to death in Canada. That is 456 in the United States, 12 in Canada. Only 4 were fatally shot in the United Kingdom. Those nations, of course, have common sense gun safety laws, and they are not constantly being derailed by the National Rifle Association and the gun manufacturers. Guns are also the leading cause of police officer assaults. From 2012 to 2020, 735 officers were assaulted and injured with a gun in our country, accounting for 3/4 of line-of-duty assaults over this period. Officers face unacceptably high risks every single day as they do their jobs. It doesn't have to be like this. An analysis of state gun laws and police fatalities found that the states with the strongest gun laws had far fewer police officer fatalities than the states with the weakest gun laws that allow violent criminals to run amok with guns. And yet Republicans continue to want to pass laws that further weaken our gun laws and thus endanger law enforcement along with everybody else, even when the police make it clear that they oppose those laws. In Texas, law enforcement opposed a bill to allow people to conceal carry without a permit. The Texas Police Chiefs Association said the bill posed a real threat to all law enforcement and the people. The Republican-controlled Texas legislature passed it anyway. The same thing happened in 4 other states. Law enforcement in Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio, and Iowa all strongly opposed permitless carry bills, and in each state, GOP lawmakers simply ignored them and passed the bills anyway. In Ohio, law enforcement and teachers came together to oppose a law to arm teachers, kindergarten through 12 teachers, but once again, Republicans passed the bill anyway over strong objections from the police. When Democrats had control of the House, we passed numerous bipartisan bills, Mr. Chairman, that were signed into law and are improving law enforcement safety and wellness right now. These bills include the Protecting America's First Responders Act, the Public Safety Officer Support Act, the Confidential Opportunities for Peer Support Cops Counseling Act, and the Law Enforcement De-Escalation Training Act. And we passed laws that would make everybody in America safer by reducing gun violence, including the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which has saved thousands of lives. I encourage my colleagues across the aisle to join us in proposing and passing meaningful, substantive, common sense, constitutional legislation that offers real solutions to the challenges our cops face every day on the streets in America and make everybody safer. In the meantime, we have no opposition to collecting more information and reporting to Congress. I just hope our colleagues are prepared to take meaningful legislative action to improve officer safety. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now offers an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report.
Amendment in the
Without
nature.
objection, the amendment nature of substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purposes of amendment. Chair now is recognized to explain the amendment. This amendment simply edits the short title of the bill. There is no substantive change to the bill. I urge support for the amendment and yield back. Who seeks recognition? The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to say that I do associate myself with all the comments of the ranking member. As we know, he's spoken very candidly the truth of what we all know, and especially myself, having experienced gun violence. I could not be more truthful and honest about what he has just said, but law enforcement officers do serve as our first line of defense against danger. And with this bill, we have an opportunity to equip the Department of Justice and Congress with crucial information to better understand and enhance officer safety. Law enforcement officers deserve to return home safely to their families, knowing their well-being is a priority. Our federal law enforcement officers face long hours, immense pressure, and unpredictable dangers. Over time, this constant strain can take a significant toll on their health and their welfare, in particular their mental health. While the mental health resources currently available are a positive step, there is always more room for improvement. This report will provide invaluable insights into the challenges our officers face and what additional support that they need to remain physically and mentally safe. Federal law enforcement officers dedicate themselves to protecting our nation, and it is our responsibility to ensure they receive the protection and care that they deserve. I support this legislation, even though it's not enough, and I will hope that it provides information that we can use to develop bipartisan proposals that will improve officer safety and wellness, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's always good, like when we have something that's bipartisan, to point it out, because it happens so little around here anymore. But rather than giving like a really big, long speech, I feel like I could just use this, and this will tell you that I think it's good, right? So like that's a fist, American flag, fire. So I'll just, from now on, when we do things where like we agree, I'll just hold this up rather than giving like a really big, long speech. So job well done, guys.
Would the gentleman yield?
Oh, sure, I'll yield.
But I'm not sure everybody recognizes the reference there. Would you explain where that comes from?
Yeah, so this is how when we're in like a chat with friends, right, where we're like having a casual chat about like where we're dropping missiles.
Are you talking about a public chat room?
Yeah, but like, and with friends, and we're just like, you know, hamming about who we're gonna bomb and all of that. But we agree, we fist American flag fire. So I'm holding this up. I think we could just keep the committee shorter if like when we agree, we just hold this up.
No, I think you're supposed to have the flexed arm instead of the fist.
No, it was just,
Okay.
it was just the fist. What signal chat are you in?
But
I was on Twitter.
If the gentleman would yield for an additional question,
Sure.
But what happens if there are reporters who might be there for that?
Well, hopefully they support America and that it's fire.
So you're telling me we can't have a bipartisan conversation among members of the committee without a journalist being there?
Well, we can, but if you don't add them, if you don't want them to know.
And what if they just happen to show up somehow?
Well, that's because somebody added them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I do.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
It is hard to follow up behind Mr. Moskowitz on any given day. But I did just kind of want to reiterate what the ranker talked about when he talked about Texas, and he mentioned that permitless carry was something that went through the Texas House. And I can remember being on the floor and seeing all the law enforcement officers coming to Austin to lobby us and make sure that we did the right thing. And they also testified, and they told their stories, and they talked about how dangerous it was. And for whatever reason, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, it all fell on deaf ears. And it made me wonder if Republicans really meant it when they said that they backed the blue. Because when given an opportunity to back the blue, they didn't. And today, we heard from the chairman that this is all about supporting law enforcement. And to be clear, I am going to also support this bill. But the idea that you can say on one hand, I support law enforcement, while on the other hand, I am okay with January 6ers getting out who assaulted law enforcement. If you can say I support law enforcement, yet you still continue to pass bills that are causing more deaths, not only to our precious children, but it makes it so much more dangerous. Right now, it is difficult to recruit law enforcement officers because of some of these crazy laws. A lot of law enforcement officers want to go to states that are smarter about their gun laws. So I'm just asking, again, I'm going to support this bill, but if we are going to be amenable enough to say that, you know what, transparency in these numbers, this is something that will be helpful for all of us to be able to evaluate, why can't we have a real conversation on what it takes to actually keep us safe in this country? That's the only thing that I'm asking for, is a real discourse, a real conversation about what does it look like to keep not only the streets in my district safe, but the streets in your district safe as well, because we as Americans should want to be safe. We as elected officials carry the responsibility of making our streets safe. So with that, I will yield.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this one because I thought we all agreed, and I guess we do on the bill, but I just wanted to bring something up. I'm a gun owner. I have permit to carry, do everything right, and never have had a problem, thank God. Pray to God I never, ever would have to use it. I qualify every single, at least every 10 days. You only have to qualify once every 2 years, and I'm responsible. And that's the point. The majority of gun owners in America, legal gun owners, are responsible. But, you know, murdering is against the law. Stealing a gun is now against the law. Violence with a gun is against the law. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Threatening somebody with a gun is against the law. Scraping the serial numbers, filing the serial numbers off a gun is against the law. You know, some things that should be against the law, prematurely releasing violent offenders back into the street over and over and over again, not doing anything when people show that they have a horrible history, that they commit crimes, that they've threatened people, they're online, what they look like online, their online character. But what we do is we inflict more and more regulations and jam up legal people that would never hurt anybody, and it's very easy. I'm going to tell you a story. It's true, and I got a lot of stories. A young woman, though, from Pennsylvania, had a permit to carry, never has even gotten a speeding ticket, didn't have a problem at all, single young African-American woman. She's driving into New Jersey, drives over the bridge, makes a mistake, didn't realize she had to have another permit in New Jersey. Again, this is a person who never did anything bad and legally was carrying in the state of Pennsylvania. So she gets stopped, and she lets the police officer know and says, just so you know, officer, I have a gun. It's in my glove compartment. Wanted you to know that. It wasn't the officer's problem. He was in New Jersey. He had to abide by the law. He had to arrest her. Never had a speeding ticket, this woman, right? Had to arrest her. You know what they did to her? They gave her 3 years in prison. And fortunately, the governor stepped in and got her out. That's what some of these laws we do are not going after the real cause of the problem. There are bad people out there. And you know what? When you pass more and more and more restrictive laws against legal gun owners, good people get in trouble. We should have some laws, I agree, but good people get in trouble. And I'm going to really lay this one on everybody, and this is a big surprise. The bad people, the murderers, those that commit violence with guns, This may sound weird, but they don't care if they got a permit or not.
Well,
Guess what? They steal their guns. They get their guns from illegal sources. They file the serial numbers off their guns. I was in the state Senate in New Jersey. We were doing a bill on guns, and one of the other state senators said to me, why didn't you vote for this thing? And I said, and I gave her the whole speech that I just said now. And she said, yeah, but this was a legal gun. It only had the serial numbers filed off. It was illegal. You can't do that.
Rep. Drew,
we
will
already
you-
have these laws. Enforce the damn laws we have now. Go after the bad people. Go after the people that have severe psychiatric issues. Don't do this to good law-abiding Americans. This is a good bill. I'm sorry I got into this, but I couldn't help it because everybody else.
No, Rep, will you yield for a friendly, just
Sure.
couple of questions?
I can yield you. Yes, I'll yield you.
Okay,
Yield to you.
perfect. I'm licensed to carry as well. I'm a Texan. So I'm licensed to carry, own firearms as well. And so I appreciate that. The bill that I was referring to through our state house, the concern for law enforcement was that anyone would be allowed to carry and they would not go through any type of training or anything like that. And would you agree with me? I don't know what licensing you went through specifically. I'm guessing it's New Jersey.
I have New Jersey, New York. I've got Washington, D.C., so I've gone through a lot.
But I'm sure in your trainings, they talk about how to safely store the firearm. They talk about things such as, where you should aim when you're using it and do not aim unless you plan to use it, especially when you're going to potentially use it on somebody, correct?
And those are good things.
Correct.
Reclaiming my time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, those are good things. I'm not arguing with that. Most everywhere has all that. In fact, I can't speak for every single state in the union. And it's curious, too. Some states, like Vermont, that are generally 10 Democrat, and I'm not giving you a hard time, I promise. But they have very liberal philosophy on this. It's an individual state-by-state thing. But I'll yield back to the chairman.
Gentleman yields back. If there's no objection, I'm going to submit for the record a survey conducted by the National Association of Chiefs of Police. 86.4% of the U.S. chiefs of police and sheriffs support nationwide recognition of state-issued concealed weapons permits. 76% of those same heads of departments believe that qualified law-abiding armed citizens help law enforcement reduce violent criminal activity. Seeing no objection, I submit that for the record. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep this really brief. I care deeply about the issues of mental health. It's one of the issues that I ran on. And like my colleagues, I will be supporting this. But there is something that we could do today to help the mental health of our Capitol Police. Today. There is a plaque that is waiting to be hung by the architect of the Capitol that is about the sacrifices and the injuries and the vicious attacks that our Capitol Police endured on January 6th. It is made, it is ready to be hung, and the Speaker of the House will not release it to the architect of the Capitol to be hung. We know where it's supposed to go. Everything is dotted, everything is crossed. Why is it that this very simple gesture that we could make today to thank the Capitol Police for what they've done and to acknowledge the suffering that they've gone through, we can't even get that hung up? So I will support this, but we actually could be putting pressure on some folks in our own chamber to acknowledge what has happened to these officers who protect us every day. And I just find it disgusting that we can't get this plaque hung up to acknowledge what they've been through. And I see the ranking member would like some time, and I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you for yielding, Ms. Ballin, and thank you for that very important intervention in this discussion. I wish that, I wish our colleagues would talk to the House leadership about doing this. I heard from Gladys Sicknick, Mrs. Sicknick, who's the mother of the late Capitol officer Brian Sicknick, who died on January 7th, 2021, after severe violent attacks he suffered on January 6th. He had multiple strokes, and he died the very next day. But I hear from Capitol officers all the time asking the question, when will the plaque go up? It's not that big a deal, really, and given the extraordinary sacrifice which members on both sides of the aisle have recognized verbally, you think it would be the least that we could do to post this plaque in honor of the officers who fought for us on January 6th. And we saw members fleeing that day. No member was violently assaulted, although there were lots of injuries and lots of deaths. More than 140 of our officers were brutalized, wounded, injured, hospitalized, hit over the head, smashed in the face. People suffered broken noses, broken jaws, broken ribs. Why is this not happening? The gentlelady from Vermont, I don't even think you were here with us back when that happened. She was not a member of Congress then, but I thank you for listening to the officers about this, because it's a rather shocking situation that people will come and mouth pieties about backing the blue, but when it comes right down to it, they're backing the coup instead, in the way it's been retroactively rehabilitated and turned into Mardi Gras, as I think the new U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia describes it. It was Mardi Gras, he said, and the president has said that his followers actually greeted our cops with hugs and kisses. He said it was a day of beauty, it was a day of love. He makes it sound like it was Woodstock. Woodstock for the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. So come on, let's get serious. If a lot of the legislation we're looking at today is about honoring the police officers, let's honor the cops who helped save our lives on that day. And if you doubt that that was the case, go back and listen to our Republican leaders, including Speaker Johnson, who condemned the atrocious violence that took place on that day against our officers in an attempt to hang Mike Pence and assassinate Nancy Pelosi and overturn our system of government. I yield back to you, and thank you for yielding.
And I yield the balance to the member, Ms. Scanlon.
And I just wanted to add, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's more important than ever that we get that plaque hung after the disgraceful pardoning of people who actually were convicted for attacking our Capitol Police officers and our Metropolitan Police officers. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Well, it seems like the Democrats have jumped the gun, so to speak, on the gun control bills or gun rights bills. That's not the debate that we're having right here, but I find it necessary to insert some facts into this dialogue because they have jumped the gun. And I would point out that Ashley Babbitt was the only person killed with a gun on January 6th. That was by a police officer. Now, a recent study of Ohio's constitutional carry law conducted by the Center for Justice Research shows that after constitutional carry was enacted in Ohio, the rates of crime involving a firearm decreased in 6 of Ohio's 8 largest cities. So this is, I think Paul Harvey would say we need to deliver the rest of the story. There may have been opposition to these bills when they passed in the state legislatures, but there's no proof that they had a negative effect, and there's a proof that people are safer after this has happened. And then if we get to the effects on law enforcement, results of that same study in Ohio show that constitutional carry did not appear to have any appreciable effort on law enforcement injuries or deaths by firearms in Ohio's cities of interest. And then finally, somebody earlier referenced that Ohio had a debate and ultimately allowed some school districts to carry, for people to carry in the schools of some of those districts. And this is the case nationwide. Again, for the rest of the story, people need to know who are watching this, there's never been a shooting, a mass school shooting, in a school that allows people to carry in that school. And so with that, I'm going to That's the rest of the story. I'm going to yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Question is on the adoption of the amendment in nature of a substitute. This will be followed immediately by a vote on reporting the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is on favor of reporting the bill as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. Without objection, the bill will be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute incorporating all adopted amendments, and staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 2255, the Federal Law Enforcement Officer Service Weapon Purchase Act, for purposes of markup, and move that the committee reported favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R.
Without